Everything you've learned about the Underground Railroad is incomplete. The original escape route didn't run north, it ran south, to Spanish Florida, where freedom wasn't just a dream, it was a promise backed by a king's decree and defended by former slaves. And it was built by one extraordinary man, a warrior who escaped slavery not once, not twice, but 3 separate times in his life. A man who was tortured with 200 lashes, sold back into bondage, and still returned to lead his people to freedom again. His name was Francisco Menéndez. You've probably never heard of him, but after this video, you'll never forget his incredible story. Around 1700, a boy was born along the Gambia River in West Africa. He belongs to the Mandinka people of that region. We will never know his birth name. It was taken from him along with everything else when slave traders captured him as a young boy. Sometime between 1709 and 1711, he was chained, loaded onto a ship, and sent across the Atlantic Ocean. His destination was Carolina, a British colony where enslaved Africans already outnumbered white colonists by a ratio of 2 to 1. The rice plantations of Carolina were brutal killing fields, back-breaking labor under a burning sun, savage punishment for any mistake, but whispers spread through the slave quarters at night. Stories of a place called Florida, Spanish territory, where freedom was possible. In 1693, Spain's King Charles II had issued a royal decree that would change thousands of lives forever. Any enslaved person who escaped British territory and reached Florida would be granted freedom. 2 conditions: convert and serve 4 years. Convert to Catholicism, serve 4 years in the Spanish militia. That was the price of freedom. Many considered it a bargain worth any risk. In 1715, war erupted across the southeast. The Yamasee Indians rose against English colonists. Francisco saw his only chance. He escaped into the chaos. Not alone, with his wife Ana Maria and others, they disappeared into the coastal swamps heading south toward hope. For nearly a decade, Francisco fought alongside the Yamasee against the English, learning warfare, building alliances, becoming a leader of men. By 1724, he finally reached St. Augustine, Florida, Spanish territory at last. He believed his long journey was finally over. He was wrong. Despite the king's promise of freedom, the local governor had other plans for these valuable escaped slaves from British lands. Governor Benavides sold Francisco and 30 other refugees at public auction in 1729, enslaved again in the land of promise. But Spanish slavery operated under different rules than English bondage. Slaves had rights. They could own property. They could sue masters. Most importantly, enslaved men could serve as soldiers. And Francisco Menéndez had already proven himself a warrior of exceptional skill and courage. In 1726, still legally enslaved, he was appointed captain of St. Augustine's Free Black Militia, a slave commanding free soldiers. When English forces attacked in 1728, Francisco led the defense of St. Augustine. His bravery in battle became legendary. Year after year, he petitioned the governor for the freedom he had been promised. Year after year, his petitions were ignored or rejected. 12 years of fighting, 12 years of petitions. Then, in 1738, a new governor named Montiano finally granted his request. But Governor Montiano gave Francisco something even greater than personal freedom. He gave him the power to build something unprecedented in America. 2 miles north of St. Augustine, on a marshy frontier facing potential English invasion, a new fortified settlement would rise from nothing. Its full name was Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose. Today, we call it Fort Mose, pronounced Mose, and it changed American history forever. Fort Mose became the first legally sanctioned free black settlement in what would eventually become the territory of the United States of America. Francisco Menéndez was appointed its leader. He held both civil and military authority, governor of a town, commander of its armed defenders. By 1738, approximately 100 people called Fort Mose their home, men and women, husbands and wives, parents and children. They came from across Africa, Mandingo, Congo, Karabali, Mina, Gamba. At least a dozen different nations united by their escape from bondage. These weren't just survivors, they were skilled professionals, blacksmiths, carpenters, farmers, cattlemen, boatmen. They built a real community there. The fort itself was modest in construction, earthen walls reinforced with wooden stakes, cactus barriers, a watchtower, a shallow protective moat, but its strategic purpose was enormous. Fort Mose stood as Spain's first line of defense against any English military advance from the north. Who better to defend against English slave owners than the very people who had risked everything to escape their brutal plantation system forever? On December 28, 1739, Francisco married Ana Maria in the Catholic Church. Finally legal, finally recognized, finally home. For one brief shining moment, Fort Mose represented everything America would later claim to stand for: freedom, opportunity, a fresh start for all. Word of Fort Mose spread like wildfire through the plantation slave quarters of Carolina and Georgia, a place where dreams became real possibility, a sanctuary where slaves transformed into soldiers, where black men commanded respect and authority, where families could stay together and prosper. On September 9, 1739, near the Stono River in South Carolina, 20 enslaved men decided the time had come to act. They seized weapons from a local store. They raised a banner bearing a single powerful word that echoed across history. That word was liberty. Their destination was Fort Mose, Spanish Florida, freedom. They marched south, and their numbers grew to nearly 100 desperate souls seeking hope. The Stono Rebellion became the largest slave uprising in all of British colonial America. It terrified white plantation owners across the entire South. Most rebels never reached Florida. They were hunted down and killed. But they died trying to reach what Francisco Menéndez had built for them. The English colonists were both terrified and furious. In 1740, they decided to destroy Fort Mose and St. Augustine once and for all. General James Oglethorpe assembled a massive invasion force, thousands of soldiers, hundreds of sailors, Native American allies, a powerful naval fleet. When the invasion began, the people of Fort Mose evacuated south. They retreated behind St. Augustine's walls, and then they waited patiently. British forces occupied the abandoned fort. 170 soldiers under Colonel John Palmer settled in, expecting an easy conquest ahead. For 27 days, St. Augustine endured constant bombardment. Cannonballs crashed into buildings, but the defenders refused to surrender their city. Then on June 14, 1740, 2 hours before dawn, Francisco Menéndez gathered his forces and prepared to strike back hard. 300 Spanish regular soldiers, the Fort Mose Black Militia, Yamasee and Seminole warriors. They moved silently through the darkness toward battle. The British garrison was sound asleep. Internal disputes between Scottish Highlanders and English regulars had left them disorganized and poorly defended. At 4 in the morning, Francisco's combined forces attacked with overwhelming fury. What followed would be remembered forever as Bloody Mose. Hand-to-hand combat in the pre-dawn darkness, swords clashing, muskets firing, clubs swinging. 75 British soldiers died in brutal fighting. 34 more were captured alive. Colonel Palmer lay dead with his officers. The survivors fled in absolute terror back toward Georgia. Governor Montiano officially commended Francisco Menéndez for extraordinary valor in battle. He sent reports praising him directly to the Spanish king. The fort was destroyed in the fighting. But Francisco Menéndez had won a victory that would echo through American military history for centuries. With Fort Mose in ruins, Francisco returned to Street Augustin. He became a privateer, a legal pirate hunting English merchant ships for Spain. It was dangerous work raiding enemy vessels on the open sea. In 1741, after years of successful raids, his luck finally ran out. The English privateer ship Revenge captured Francisco's vessel. When they realized who they had caught, their fury knew absolutely no boundaries. This was the man who had led the black militia at Bloody Mose, the man who had killed their countrymen. Now the English wanted their revenge. They tied Francisco to a ship's cannon. They gave him 200 brutal lashes, while his captors watched and cheered his suffering with glee. Then they poured salt water into his open wounds. They called it pickling. They threatened him with castration, pure sadistic cruelty without mercy. When they finished torturing him, they sold Francisco Menéndez into slavery once again, in the Bahamas, to a plantation owner named Mr. Stone. After decades of fighting for freedom, after building America's first free black community, after everything he had accomplished, a slave once again. For most human beings, this would have been the end of the story. Total defeat, complete despair. But Francisco Menéndez was not most people. The historical records go silent about what happened next. We don't know if he escaped or if Spain ransomed him back from bondage somehow. What we know for certain is this. In 1752, a second Fort Mose was constructed, bigger than before, stronger defensive walls. And in 1759, 18 years after being tortured and sold, Francisco Menéndez reappears in Spanish records as its commanding officer. 18 years after 200 lashes, after salt water in his wounds, after being sold like property, he was back leading his people again. By 1759, the rebuilt Fort Mose had 67 residents, 37 men, 15 women, 7 boys, 8 girls, 22 homes. They had built a wooden church with a resident priest. They farmed the surrounding land. They patrolled the frontier. They lived as free people. But empires play chess with human lives. And in the colonial game between European powers, nothing built by ordinary people lasts forever safely. In 1763, the 7 Years' War finally ended. Britain and Spain signed the Treaty of Paris to formally establish peace terms. Under the treaty's terms, Spain traded all of Florida to Britain. In exchange, Spain received Havana back. Florida was lost to the English. For the free black residents of Fort Mose, remaining under British rule meant only one terrible thing: re-enslavement under their former enemies. In August 1763, Francisco Menéndez, now approximately 60 years old, prepared for one final journey across the Caribbean Sea. He boarded a small schooner poetically named Our Lady of Sorrows. With him were his wife, Ana Maria, their 4 children, 50 other refugees. They sailed south to Cuba, Spanish territory where their freedom would still be legally protected and recognized by the colonial authorities there. In Matanzas province on Cuba's northern coast, they established a new community from nothing. They named it San Agustin de la Nueva Florida, St. Augustine of the New Florida. Even in exile across the sea, they clung to the memory of what they had built and what they had lost. Francisco eventually moved his family to Havana. He received a government pension for his decades of military service. He died there as a free man. For 200 years after that exodus, Fort Mose was completely forgotten by history. The marsh slowly swallowed its ruins into the earth. The Underground Railroad became synonymous with escape routes running north to Canada. The original Southern Freedom Trail was erased from memory. Then in 1968, a local historian named Jack Williams discovered an old Spanish map. He purchased the land where Mose once stood. In 1986, archaeologist Kathleen Deegan began systematic excavations. She uncovered the moat, the earthen walls, the buried truth at last. Historian Jane Landers traveled to archives in Spain and Cuba. She recovered the names, the family records, the personal stories of Mose's people. In 1994, Fort Mose received official designation as a National Historic Landmark, the highest recognition of historical significance possible. In 2009, the National Park Service officially named Fort Mose as a precursor site of the Underground Railroad Freedom Network in America. Today, Fort Mose operates as a Florida state park open to all visitors. You can walk the same ground where Francisco Menéndez once walked free. In May 2025, a full-scale replica of the 1738 fort was completed. Francisco's vision now stands physically again. And in Cuba, the community of Ceiba Mocha still exists near Matanzas. Descendants of Fort Mose's original freedom seekers may still live there today. One man, enslaved 3 separate times across 4 decades. Free 3 separate times through sheer determination, he simply never stopped fighting back. Francisco Menéndez proved something essential about human freedom. It is never simply given by those in power. It must be taken, again and again. Fort Mose proves something essential about Black American history. It was never only a story of oppression and victimhood under brutal masters. It was always also a story of resistance, of community building, of people who constructed their own freedom with their own hands against all odds. Next time someone mentions the Underground Railroad to you, tell them about the original Freedom Trail, the one that ran south to Spanish Florida. Tell them about Fort Mose. Tell them about Francisco Menéndez. His remarkable story deserves to be known by every American who values true freedom